In this lesson, we're going to be parenting layers for animation with a null object. Okay, so what we're going to be creating in this lesson is an animation for our clouds. So let's go ahead and grab our 3 cloud images, and I'm going to drop them on top of everything here in the project in our timeline. So we'll zoom out a little bit. You can kind of see what those look like. And I think I'm going to want to rotate these so we get kind of this same diagonal look. So I'm going to grab my selection tool, hit the R key with those clouds selected, and then we can kind of rotate them down. Looks like that's about 25 degrees. And then I'm just going to take a few and we'll kind of move them around, maybe scale one up or down, maybe down a little bit. Just get a few different looks here for those. And then we can take the same clouds by shift selecting them and hitting Control C, Control V to paste. And I'm just going to kind of continue to make the path of the clouds and then maybe grab it and move it around so that we get a little bit of a different look each time. And this time I'm going to shift select all of them and hit Control C, Control V. And we'll move these back and again just kind of rearrange it to get a different look. This one's a little hard to grab since it's smaller. There we go. Maybe make this one even smaller, kind of move it into the middle there. All right, so that looks pretty good. It might not be perfect. We'll figure it out in a minute. If they're too opaque, they might be kind of taking over everything. You could always come in here, shift select all the clouds, hit the T key to bring up your opacity and turn down their transparency a little bit. That's about 42%. I think that looks a little bit better. Okay, so now that I've gotten all of those laid out, you can see I can't see all of them at the same time. I've basically laid them all out with the anticipation that I will be animating them. And the clouds need to move even faster than the plane because if you're considering what happens with parallax is objects that are closer to your camera are going to move the most quickly. The furthest away are going to be slowest. So right now we've maintained that with our map and plane, and we need to continue that with our clouds. So we might even need more clouds depending on what's happening, but you can see that the clouds we did create are bigger than that bounding box of the map. The map is what we're seeing here in that brown. So it might be just fine. I'm not quite sure yet. So let's figure that out. We'll go ahead now and create our null object so that our clouds have something to follow. And that's really what parenting is you're telling an object or a layer to follow another layer. So we'll come up here to layer, choose new, and choose null object. And then to parent these to that null object, we'll come down here and shift select all of our clouds. And then you want to grab this little swirl next to where it says none under the parent column. And the swirl is called the parenting pick whip. So what you can do is simply grab it from one of them. If you've shift selected all of them, it'll change all of them to be parented to the same thing. And we'll drag that pick whip up to the null object. And now you can see instead of that saying none, they all say null 1. And now let's go ahead and just lock our clouds so we don't accidentally animate any of those. By having them all selected and hitting the lock icon, I locked all of them. And then we'll just grab our null object and let's bring open the position for that. We'll go ahead and set a keyframe with the position right here. Then I'm going to scrub all the way to the end. And now I can zoom out and grab this null object. And you can see that my clouds are following it, but I'm going to undo that because I want it to not be the scale, but actually be the position. And you can see how they start to change. Now I just drag this way far backwards. And to move it, you might need to try to grab it right on that edge. That's going to make it a little bit easier for you. And you can also just start to drag the property of the position. This is going to be your X that moves it from side to side. So you'll have to kind of toggle between the X and Y since we're moving them in that diagonal way. So hopefully the clouds do move more quickly than everything else. They should based on the size that we've given them. So let's go ahead and play back to see what happens. I'm going to hit the 0 key on my number pad, and definitely I can already tell those clouds move the most quickly of all of our items. So we've got our little plane moving, we've got our map, and then the clouds as well. It looks like the clouds kind of part for a moment, and then we start to see a few more. We might actually want to add one more kind of in the mix, maybe because the cloud cover does get very thin there in the middle. I think that's looking pretty good. We're just watching this playback. I think maybe right in here around this point, let's zoom out and see. So right here we could use another one, or we could simply unlock whichever cloud this is. I'm not sure which one, so we can just unlock all of them. We'll just grab this one right here and kind of bring it over into the middle a little bit more so it's more visible. And that particular one, I think the reason why we're having more trouble seeing it is because it's over the land. These being over the water were a little more visible because they were on a dark background. So if I shift select a few of the clouds that I know are going to be here, just shift selecting to add those, then we'll come over here to our clouds, hit the T key, and we'll turn up their transparency up to, let's say, about 80%. So now they'll be more visible. That looks much better. Great. Okay, so now we have essentially animated our clouds with the null object. So now that we've done that, you can kind of see what that null object is. It's basically an invisible object that you can use as a control for other objects in your scene. So it has all those same properties as a regular layer. You can see it's got all this transformation properties. But a lot of times a null is only used as a control. You're not going to see it used in an animation by itself really, because it doesn't have any kind of color. When you render it, it's almost like it's just invisible, but you use it to drive other things. Now by parenting that by parenting the clouds to that null object, we're able to really quickly control the movement of all of those clouds with 2 keyframes instead of having to set keyframes on every single cloud layer. Now, if you're not comfortable with using nulls to drive your animations, you of course could set keyframes on all of those clouds, but you are going to have more potential to not have them look realistic because the clouds won't be moving quite like they would in real life, and you'll also just have to deal with more keyframes. It's up to you for how you set that up, but I would definitely practice trying to parent multiple things to nulls to speed up your animation workflow. Okay, so now in our next lesson, we're going to add a little path that's going to go behind our plane, and we're going to make it look like it's a dotted line that kind of dots along as the plane flies over. And there's going to be a couple things we need to change and set up to get it to look right. So we'll be playing around with that in the next lesson.